let me ask you about one of the most complex geopolitical situations in history. Um, One aspect of it is the Cold War between Iran and Israel. The bigger picture of it is sometimes referred to as Israel-Palestine conflict. What are all the parties, nations involved? What are the interests that are involved? What's the rhetoric? Um, can you understand, make the case for each side of this conflict?
You're opening a new can of worms that it takes another 3 hours of conversation.
Just 3 hours?
At least. But what I can tell you is this. Iran, prior to 1979, viewed itself under the Shah as a kind of a, if not supporter of Israel, was in very good terms with Israel. They had an embassy in Iran, or unofficial embassy in Iran. They had certain projects that helping with the agriculture and so forth in Iran. But since 1979, that completely reversed.
Yeah.
Part of it is that the issue of the Palestinian plight remained very much at the heart of the revolutionary Iranians, who would see that part of the United States is to support, part of the United States guilt, sin, is to support Israel vis-a-vis its very suppressive, very oppressive treatment of the Palestinians, completely illegal taking over of the territories which is not theirs since 1967. And therefore, it is upon the Iranian regime, Iranian Islamic Republic, to support the cause of the Palestinians. This came about at the time when the rest of the support for the Palestinians, including Arab nationalism, basically reached a stage of bankruptcy. I mean, much of the regimes of the Arab world either are now coming to terms with Israel, or in one way or another, because of their own contingencies, because of their own concerns and interests, are willy-nilly accepting Israel in the region. Now, that old task of rhetorically supporting the Palestinians falls upon the Islamic Republic, that sees itself as the champion of the Palestinians now, without, as a matter of fact, having either the support of the Iranian people behind him. If you ask, if tomorrow there would be a poll or a referendum, I would doubt that 80% of the Iranian people would approve of the policies of the Islamic Republic vis-a-vis the issue of Palestine. Nor the Palestinians themselves, because the Islamic Republic is only supporting those factions within the Palestinian movement which are Islamic, quote unquote. And even within that, there is problems with Hamas, for instance. But nevertheless, it's for the Islamic Republic some kind of a propaganda tool to be able to use it for its own sake and claim that we are the champions of the Palestinian people. Whether they have a solution, if you look at their rhetoric, if you listen to their rhetoric, it's the destruction of the state of Israel. And that, it seems to me, creates a certain anxiety in the minds of the Israelis, Israeli population, and Israeli government, particularly those who are now in power, Netanyahu, the Likud, and more kind of a right-wing politics of polity of today's Israel. That being said, I think also the Israelis try to get an extra mileage out of threat of Iran, quote unquote, in order to present themselves rightful to for terms of security and whatever else, the way that they're treating the Palestinians, which I think is extremely unjust. I think it's extremely unwise for Israel to carry on with these policies as they did since 67 at least, and not to try to come to terms with it. Of course, there are a huge amount of, I'm not denying that at all. It's a huge amount of uh, failures, mistakes, and stupidity on the side of the Palestinian leadership in various stages, not to try to make a deal or try to come to terms in some fashion. But it's a very complex picture, and it's rather unfair to the Palestinians to accuse them for not coming to terms with Israel under a very uneven circumstances, when they are not in a position to try to make a fair deal in terms of the territories or in terms of their security in future vis-a-vis Israel.
So I think there's, as you probably know, quite a lot of people that would have a different perspective than you just stated in terms of, taking the perspective of Israel and characterizing the situation. Can you steelman that their side? Can you steelman Israel's side that they're trying to be a sovereign nation, trying to protect themselves against threats, ultimately wanting to create a place of safety, a place where people can pursue all the things that you want to pursue in life, including foremost happiness?
I tend to agree with you, and I have all the respect for the fact that Israel would like to create security and happiness for its own people. But there are two arguments. One is a moral argument. To my mind, as a historian, uh, Jews around the world, for all through their history, suffered. And this is a history of suffering. It's a history, memory of suffering. And I find it enormously difficult to believe that a nation that's the product of so much sacrifice, suffering, loss of life, uh, and variety of Holocaust, above all, would find itself in a position not to give the proper justice to a people who could be their neighbors. And that is a moral argument which I cannot believe under any circumstances can be accepted. Second, in real terms, what do you want to? You want to commit a genocide? Do you have a population there that you have to come to terms with it? And you cannot just postpone as they did. Since 67, they're postponing and hoping that it goes away somehow. I don't think it's going to go away. And it's going to get worse rather than better.
It's a long, nuanced discussion, and I look forward to having it. So we'll just leave it there for the moment. But it is a stressful place in the world where the rhetoric is existential, where Iran makes claims that it wants to wipe a country off the face of the earth. It's just the level of intensity of rhetoric is unlike anywhere else in the world,
and extremely dangerous,
and in both directions. So one, the real danger of the rhetoric actually being acted upon, and then the extreme political parties using the rhetoric to justify even a greater escalation. So if Iran is saying that it's saying that they're wanting to wipe Israel off the face of the earth, that justifies any response
On the other side.
on the other side.
Of course, I tend to agree with you fully. And unfortunately, this is a very critical situation that this region is facing, Iran in particular. I would say that I hope that in the minds of the people of Israel, there is enough or common sense to realize that probably escalation on the Israeli side is not in the favor of anybody, and try to let the Iranians to go on with their empty rhetoric as they do so far.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I cannot deny the fact that, there is a danger on the side of this regime and what it says. It cannot be denied. Nobody can justify that. Particularly because the Iranian population is not behind this regime. Certainly in the case of the Palestinians. Or for that matter, it's not Palestine. It's the Islamic Republic's involvement in Lebanon with Hezbollah. It's the Islamic Republic's involvement in Syria with Bashar Assad. Its involvement in other parts of the world, perhaps even Yemen, that all of them creates extraterritorial responsibilities or interventions, unnecessary interventions that ultimately is not in favor of best interest of the Iranian people or Iran as a country. Iran has never been involved in this kind of politics before of the Islamic Republic. So in a sense, the Iranian regime, it seems to me, by going to the extreme, try to create for itself a space that it did not have or did not deserve to have within the politics of the region. So in other words, that has become part of the tool, a kind of an instrument for, if you like to call it, some kind of an expansionism of the regime. In parts of the world where it can see there is a possibility for its presence, for its expansion. Of course, historically speaking, Iran, ever since 15th century, I think that's the earliest example I can see, in early modern times, has always a tendency of moving in the direction of not only what is today the state of Iraq, but further into the eastern coast of Mediterranean. So that's a long-term ambition that has been in the cards as far as Iran as a strategic unit is concerned, but by no means justified, and by no means could be a reasonable, could be a sane policy of a nation state as today's Iran. But the second point is that also regimes are always victims of their own rhetoric. So it's once you keep repeating something, then you become more and more committed to it. And it cannot remain anymore in the level of a rhetoric. You have to do something about it. So it's something compelling pressure to try to materialize what you've been saying in your rhetoric. And that is even extremely more dangerous as far as Iran is concerned. And it brings it to some unholy alliances that today we are witnessing. Iran is getting involved, even more dangerous than this rhetoric in terms of the vis-a-vis Israel, is its involvement with Russia and to some extent with China.